Produced by Podcast Architects.
Welcome back to another episode of The Path Forward. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Rick Fernandez, and as you can see, I'm filming live from my home studio. When I say my home studio, this is the guest room, so doing the best we can virtually here to give you a good production. And I have a very special guest, Senior Director of Clean Mobility, fellow Anserite, and California guy, Mr. Stephen Clark. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. You know, clean mobility, energy is a topic that everybody's having to consider. With President Biden, some of the policies that are coming down to try to usher in some of the energy savings, the carbon footprint to reduce. There's quite a lot on people's plate. So how did you get into clean mobility? Exactly, like, what is it? And if you had to boil it down for us.
Yeah. So let's indeed start with how I got here. It's a bit of a circuitous route. So I actually, clean mobility, to summarize, really puts together two halves of my career: automotive and energy. I went to school for a mechanical engineering degree, and on graduating, I swore off mechanical engineering for good. I got a pretty sweet gig with Mercedes corporate doing marketing for AMG and other of their brands. And when you're 22, when they hand you the keys to a 500 horsepower sedan, you're like, yeah, I don't think I'm going back to engineering counts.
Okay, so I'm thinking like Ferris Bueller's Day Off type of thing, where you're in the garage and you're taking. Okay, all right, fair enough.
But they were promoting this. I wasn't stealing the cars. They were indeed promoting. They were promoting me drive them, and they basically said, don't crash it.
Yes.
And I managed not to do so.
Well, good. Okay, keep going. So you're at Mercedes.
Yeah. Right. So I'm at Mercedes. I actually got an opportunity to do a bunch of different rotations. Like I said, marketing was one of them. Environmental safety and compliance was another. Sales, after sales. I launched the E-Class diesel way back in 2000. Oh boy, I'm going to date myself here. 2003, I think, when it first came to the U.S. So got a good smattering of what it is to work at an automotive manufacturer. And circumstances change. I followed a girl to Michigan. She's now my wife, so I changed jobs there.
It worked. It worked out.
It worked out. It was a good gamble. Ended up working for Volkswagen at that point in their safety, compliance, or non-compliance, whatever you want to call it, department. And from there, things were okay. But in 2007, the whole industry fell off a cliff. The big three went bankrupt, or two of the three went bankrupt. Volkswagen moved its operations to Virginia. And my wife and I said, I think at this point it's time for a reset. We've got to travel. We got the opportunity to travel the world for a year. We basically sold everything we had, shoved a couple pairs of shorts and T-shirts in a backpack, and traveled for a year.
Now, did you use one of those old school Volkswagen vans? The ones you see
No.
used?
This was internationally, so we didn't have a car. We did planes, trains, and automobiles where we could, and saw the better part of the world. The only continent we missed was South America, it was a great kind of perspective redefining experience as far as broadening your horizons, seeing who you live with on this planet, and really how small you are in relation to the broader world. And I think that helped shape a lot of what happened in our thinking when we came back, with regard to what is our charter, what is our purpose on this planet, and that did help shape the focus of the next half of my career, which indeed started revolving around energy, right, and energy efficiency. I got an opportunity to get into the energy industry by doing audits of the jail in San Francisco. We did lighting audits, and then I helped construction manage a lighting retrofit that was happening at the jail for the city to save ridiculous amounts of money on lighting and energy costs there. And that was kind of the jumping off point into, well, if you can do this at a jail, you can do pretty much anything in the industry. And so the rest takes the history goes. I got a chance to build and run PG&E's retro commissioning program, build that into the largest program in the U.S. at the time. I did a lot of work with higher ed, developing projects for the community college and utility partnership that was here that paired special incentives with the higher ed institutions to really spur on energy efficiency projects and help them make the decision to go above and beyond just a standard replacement. And that was really the opening of the door to the thing that I know and love and continue now is really the owner's rep or technical advisory services for these institutions, right? They have a charter educating students, running a city, whatever, right? They're not necessarily energy experts. A lot of them are getting there, to their credit, but understanding what are the benefits of a lighting retrofit or what can be done with my central plant to save energy, that they deferred to energy experts or energy advisors like us that would help them come in, identify the projects, help them go through the whole procurement process, and identify the vendor and build the project that indeed they wanted to or that they were expecting. So this, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going to ask. So, did your why develop out of your experiences traveling to kind of culminate to where you are now in service? Is that what helped you get there?
Yeah, I think so. I think that just understanding that you're a small part of a larger collective whole, and really shaped how I thought about my career going forward with regard to. I need to make a difference, right? And so what is that difference that I can make? And given my skill set and given, what I was passionate about, it's really helping. It's storytelling. That's what I call it. It's storytelling, right? There's a story behind every energy project that you do out there. And I found, both my technical background and also my preference for working with people and helping them understand technical details, but in very simple ways, providing them with the information they need to make the best decisions for whatever their circumstances are, right? Everybody's energy project is a little bit different. Their needs behind the project are different. Some want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Some just want to save money. But the cool part is, and really what I've rallied around is the ability to, create. When I do my job right, everybody wins, and that's what I love about it. Let's take a solar project, for instance, at a community college, right? Their bills, you install a solar project that generates energy for them. Their bills go down. That's direct savings for their general fund, right? There's work out there, job creation, workforce development for vendors who are constructing the project. People are getting trained, and that's real local jobs. The utility loves it because they can depend on that solar to reliably produce during times of grid constraint. That's changing and a lot of details there, but indeed it is beneficial to them as well to have that excess generation on the grid. They can push that to other places. They can do things with that excess generation, and they don't have to fire up another power plant to meet certain demands. And then there's room for consultants to continually build that technical knowledge and create these new and innovative solutions.
Well, I mean, I imagine that the technology, just like everything else, is making leaps and bounds from year to year. And I always try to think about it. So the skeptics, right? So I'm a guy from Texas. Obviously, this is oil and gas country. I mean, our tricycles come with a can of diesel down here. So what's the value proposition to someone like me that just has grown up in oil and gas country and a little bit skeptical, right? Beyond some of the savings that you mentioned, if you dive into either K-12, higher ed, what are the value propositions that we can count on? That's a great question, and again, there's value in it no matter how you look at it. And I'll pull a couple or my top three value, and let's see where those resonate. But feel free to push or ask about other areas that I don't cover. No, that's okay.
I think first and foremost, let's be clear, clean mobility is really forms of transportation that don't use fossil fuels. I'm not just talking about battery electric. There's a lot that I'll talk about that's battery electric, but this includes, e-scooters, e-bikes, hydrogen fuel cells. There's a whole market around this. But looking generally at the value propositions of clean mobility, I want to start off with cleaner air. Right, just cleaner air in our communities. I mean, we see numerous studies that show vehicle emissions and greenhouse gas emissions and particulates emitted by vehicles, especially diesel ones, disproportionately affect disadvantaged communities the most. Right. So as we address the environmental justice issues of today, reducing those localized pollutants in disadvantaged communities is a key factor. We have to do that to raise the bar on environmental justice issues and make any progress. Also, when we think about transporting kids on diesel school buses, right? We've been doing that since 1959, and I want to just say that in 1959, DDT was the pesticide of choice. Right, and the FDA was just starting to understand the toxic effects of smoking. Now, I think society has evolved to solve 2 out of those 3 issues. Right, we don't use DDT anymore, and we don't mostly allow people to smoke inside anymore. So we've made some headway there. But we're still transporting children on diesel school buses, where recent studies, I forget whether it was Stanford or somebody else, said that the particulates on the inside of a diesel school bus are worse than on the outside. So we're transporting kids in particulate chambers of diesel exhaust, and I think we can do better than that.
I've never even considered that component. Obviously everybody's aware of the emissions and what that causes, but I didn't think about, as you're sending kids back and forth to kids and then to trips, athletics, you name it. Okay, that hits home a little bit now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Keep going. That was a great idea. Something I was like, I had not even considered that, as my kids go back and forth on the bus every day to school.
Right.
So
right. And I recall very distinctly, when I was a kid, I got in trouble we got dropped off by the bus, and we would run around the back of the bus and push the bus. It was funny, right? One day, the driver slams on the brakes, it gets out and comes in, "You kids, get away from the bus!" And she was legitimately saying, "Don't get near the moving bus. You're going to get run over." But I like to think she was also saying, "Yeah, you don't want to breathe in the particulates coming out of the exhaust pipe here." So thank you very much to that bus driver.
That's awesome. So other than emissions, you got costs. Give me another big ticket item that we can count on.
Yeah. So indeed, operating costs, right? Indeed, right now, and there's a lot of right now in the argument. Right now, a zero emission vehicle is more expensive than its traditional internal combustion counterpart. But that's rapidly changing as battery technology develops and things become more mass market. But think about, the ongoing maintenance and operational cost. They're significantly lower, right? No oil changes, no fluid changes, less brake wear and tear. Basically, you're changing tires and, monitoring battery health, and that's pretty much all you're doing. So there is a significant offset of ongoing maintenance costs, and really the fuel. The electricity versus the fuel, the electricity is cheaper, especially if you have solar and battery storage that are powering these buses. The other value proposition is what I call thinking beyond the vehicle, right? These let's take battery electric buses, for instance, are another distributed energy resource: solar, wind, stationary battery storage, and now vehicles, right? So when you look at a project, you don't have to look at it as just a vehicle project, right? We used to buy buses and their sunk cost, right? You buy them, you pay something for that. You maintain them, you pay something for that. You fuel them, you pay something for that. But the dynamic starts to change when you look beyond the bus. And this is the really cool, the thing that gets me going in the morning is the ability to use now your vehicles as a revenue generating asset. Let me give you an example. I did a project back at my previous employer that looked at pairing solar storage on-site stationary storage and a vehicle to building V2B enabled school bus. And so at a central kitchen that was adjacent to the maintenance yard where the buses were housed. And so how we set up that project to be used was, the solar went in, the stationary battery storage went in, and then the EV charger, the bidirectional EV charger, was also looped into that. And what we did is we used the bus as a range extender for the stationary battery. So in the event that PG&E called a PSPS, a public safety power shutoff, which is where they voluntarily shut down the grid for anywhere from a few hours to eight days plus.
Is it brownout? Is that what y'all call it?
No, not brownout, blackout.
Okay.
Sorry, you're not getting power because we're on the hook. In California, it gets really strange really quick because the utilities have been liable for, we hear about the wildfires that their aging utility infrastructure have caused. And because they're liable for those, they've said, you know what, we're going to take the customer service hit and shut down the grid until we think it's safe. High wind events, high heat events. We're shutting things down. We're going to let things cool off. We don't want to start any fires that we're going to be held responsible for. So sorry, you're out of power from a few hours to a number of days. And traditionally, this changes, traditionally utilities were very good at, bringing service back up again. In a couple hours, they would roll some trucks. They would, reconnect the lines where a branch fell on the lines. But this changes that dynamic, right? They're willingly turning off the power for a number of days, and facilities traditionally haven't been set up for that. So what we did with this V2 vehicle to building school bus project is we used the bus as a range extender and said, okay, if the central kitchen loses power during a PSPS, we're going to depend on the on-site solar and stationary battery storage to continue to run the freezer so they don't lose $100,000 worth of food during this event. And if the PSPS is really long, we plug in our bus and we extend the range. That's another 150 kilowatt hours that they can depend on from their bus to go back into charge either the stationary battery or run the facility to increase the chances that they make it through that entire PSPS. And when they have multiple buses, right, they run one bus, they pull it out, they drive it to somewhere else that has power, and they charge it, and then they pull another bus in. So it's almost like a continual renewable loop. And when you look at the value of a traditional project, solar and storage, there's some value there. But when you factor in, I'm not going to lose $100,000 worth of food, or that starts to change project economics significantly and gets people to say, yeah, that's a really good idea. Solar and batteries might have a 17-year payback, but if I can guarantee that I'm not going to lose, $100,000 worth of food every year, suddenly that comes down to a 6-year payback or something like that.
Now you got my mind going. Could you theoretically, let's say that there's a sporting event, because if you have a blackout, right, you're affecting schools in that area, right? So things have to be canceled, shut down, depending on where it is. Could you use buses in that type of project that you're discussing to not have to cancel certain events at your school?
Yep.
I mean, because that'd be, a lot of schools. I'm thinking of Texas. There's a lot of revenue that comes in from fine arts, from sporting events, from stadiums, and you hate to lose that because of whether it's a planned one or unplanned. It's problematic, and it disappoints the kids at the end of the day, and you've got angry parents, right? That is a heck of a value proposition, because now you've got essentially portable generators. Am I right in saying that?
That's absolutely right. Think diesel genset, electric school bus. They're interchangeable.
You said the technology is coming leaps and bounds. I think about it like, did you have a plasma TV when they first came out? They're like 9,000 pounds.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Like I bought my first one in 2005 and I was so excited. That thing was about 700 pounds to try to get up the wall. And it was cool, but it was like, when I look back on it, it wasn't very much different than your big, the big box TV that you got to go touch. You got to go touch the channel button to change it.
Yep.
But now, everything is so cheap, well, comparatively cheap. The technology's very fast, can do anything from your TV, operate your house if you wanted to. Are we seeing those types of leaps and bounds in terms of technology as it applies to mobility, energy, those types of things?
Yes, we are. We are seeing, that's the other thing I love is that, you start to put together a solution for an entity you're working with, whether it's an energy master plan or that involves solar and on-site battery storage, or a vehicle conversion plan, zero emission vehicle conversion plan. And, you say, okay, here's your plan. And then somebody immediately goes, well, wait a minute, what about this product? Would this work? And you think, oh yeah, well, we can pull this one out, put this new one in, and suddenly costs go down. Or we can look at optimizing our chargers, the charging strategies behind our vehicles a little bit more based on new advances in technology, or batteries that can accept a faster charge. We're looking at we're looking at things like new charging standards that 60 kilowatts. Used to be a fast charge, right? Now, it's commonplace to get, there's 800 volt architecture on these vehicles that allow for charging in the 250 kilowatt, 300 kilowatt range. And I was at a conference a couple months ago, and they unveiled the megawatt charging standard. It's a plug about the size of my head, but it will put a megawatt of charge into a vehicle. Now, again, there's a lot of other hurdles that you have to jump through, but that shows you how fast technology is changing.
To kind of pivot, what do you see the industry in terms of jobs? And I always try to bring it back to education, because we're trying to blur those lines, right? So as you think about yourself, colleagues in the industry, I gotta think that there's a need for more experience, more workers, people that understand this technology. So I always want to ask, what needs to happen in the curriculum, at the school level, at the community college level, to really supply the demand that's coming for clean energy?
Right. That's another great question, and one of those triple bottom line or win-win things that come along with these projects is that the job creation and the education is so important and a key piece of this whole puzzle. And I think it really starts from the education perspective with weaving in an understanding of energy into curriculum in general. I'm doing a project right now where a higher ed institution's sustainability or zero net energy consultant, and we're looking at how the work that we're doing is going to trickle down into curriculum. There's no area that it doesn't touch. You look at just a basic understanding. Let's start with a basic understanding, basic knowledge of energy. The difference between a kilowatt and a kilowatt hour, right? That's important. I come from an engineering background, but I think you even see it in the industry of supposedly informed people, where they mix up kilowatts and kilowatt hours all the time. The difference is real, and it matters. And so helping kids understand, it's kind of like the difference between dollars and cents. There is a difference, and helping people understand that as part of just basic curriculum. What it takes to power a light bulb. When you flip on a switch, what happens? Right? Where does that energy come from?
It's not the 2 potatoes that I learned in science class.
That is one thing, and I've actually been thinking about a giant potato farm with some nails in them. Right? We can.
we go to Idaho for that project. University of
Exactly.
Idaho.
If the whole wind thing doesn't work out, we're going to make a potato farm.
There you go. I'm sorry, but I'm always
Yeah.
thinking about how does that, because that's what I learned in class, right? That
Right.
that was the science experiment that we did
Yep.
to demonstrate. And I hope I'm getting that right. I remember potatoes and some wires. I don't know if that
Yeah,
has
yeah,
anything to
no,
do with like.
you're
Okay.
absolutely right. I think there was a way to induce currents through potatoes by putting them in salt water or something like that.
Yeah,
But you
something.
know, indeed, that could be you created a battery essentially. So linking that simple, seemingly simple experiment with this is what people are doing to power your cars, to power your home. You know, showing them the natural extensions of these basic concepts that are being used every day and getting people excited. I think you know if I had one criticism of my engineering curriculum, it would be that they didn't make those real world links. You know, it was all about the formulas and all about getting the right answer, but it wasn't about, well, this is why you need to know this, right? And I developed that on my own, but really having institutions help their students think through the basics of energy, you know, things like, or things like what comes out of a tailpipe, right? When we burn gasoline or diesel, what comes out of that? And what are the effects of that? You know, that's important. That's important baseline knowledge to know. And then with that kind of baseline understanding of emissions and energy, then you can start to build on those specialty programs, right? Auto tech programs that focus on battery, electric or fuel cell electric vehicles, right? That we're helping that same college envision a new auto tech facility, and you know they're still talking a lot about or machining and diesel tech labs. And I'm thinking, you know, that's great and all, but we want to have a flexible space here because I guarantee in 5, 10 years, that's going away and your battery lab's coming in. Oh, and by the way, you need to have easy access to outside for when you set that battery on fire. You need to be able to push it outside. You know, things like that. You know, thinking about right, those auto tech programs, engineering programs that focus on energy management and really the flow of electrons around the different disciplines, buildings, vehicles, solar, battery, stationary batteries. That's an important concept. Or even, you know, when you get away from the sciences per se, you think more about sustainability, right? And how a teaching best practices for how to equitably deploy a clean mobility program, right? There's a lot of talk about electric vehicles for rich people, and indeed the industry has started a lot in that way. But part of the challenge now, and then there's a bunch of people that are doing great work in this field, are figuring out how to more equitably deploy electric vehicles in disadvantaged communities, reduce localized pollutants, and really create access for various different groups to take advantage of this technology, whether it's direct use or just reaping the societal benefits of having cleaner vehicles in their communities.
So I got to ask you about the myths, right? Because I think there's some confusion. And I'll give you an example. Somebody came to my door and said, "Hey, there's a big tax incentive to have solar all over your house, right?" And so I started asking questions like, "Okay, well, where do the batteries go, and where's that going to be stored at?" So I always feel like there's a lot of push, but I want to know what's real, what's my real advantage, or the myth that, hey, we're not there yet. Maybe it's still the plasma, the 700-pound plasma on the wall kind of scenario.
Yeah. So any industry that's moving as fast as this energy, clean energy industry is going to be full of myths because a new study comes out, a few people read it, but everybody else is operating on an old model or with old understanding, and it's not really their fault. But I think beginning to break down some of those myths is really important. And one of the first things that I see, one myth that I encounter a lot is battery electric vehicles create more emissions than their internal combustion counterparts. I charge my vehicle with the power grid, and that's dirtier than what comes out of the tailpipe. That's actually not true. Even in states like West Virginia that have a high percentage of coal, those vehicles, well, according to the DOE Alternative Fuel Data Center, those vehicles are still emitting 20% less emissions than their internal combustion counterparts. And that goes up to 50% on a national average, and even higher in states like California, where there's a high percentage of renewable generation on the grid right now. And that only gets better as the grid becomes cleaner and begins to be powered by even more renewable sources. Right. Next one is, I think I touched on this a little earlier. Electric vehicles are for rich people. And indeed they have a higher upfront cost, but again, we got to look at that lower overall operating cost. We have an electric vehicle and an internal combustion vehicle, and I filled up the internal combustion vehicle the other day, and it was $72. When I go and I charge my EV, even at a fast charger station, it's $20. And if I charge it during peak times, like I'm on a road trip and I'm going to stop for 20 minutes and grab a bite to eat and let the kids run around so they stop throwing Cheerios at each other, it's $42. It's still not the same. And you're getting roughly the same 300 miles out of a tank. EV prices are coming down, and with prices coming down, and the tax advantages through the Inflation Reduction Act, there's this growing as a service model where you actually don't have to pay anything for electric vehicles, for charging infrastructure, or any combination therein. There are entities who want to own, operate, maintain all of that infrastructure for you, and basically have a vehicle ready for you to go in the morning to do whatever you want to do with it. Move kids, deliver packages, run Lyft or Uber. It's an as a service model. You pay a monthly fee, roughly for the equivalent of what you would pay for fuel previously, and they take care of all of that for you. You don't need a lot of upfront cash.
So do you think we'll see like our busing entities in Texas, because obviously we've got a lot of space, a lot of districts, some are rural. We may not have our own buses internally. We may have to farm that out to different companies. So would it make sense for those companies to start the shift and save money on the upkeep of their buses, but in turn it's less cost to a school district, right? It's less of a hamper for them because they don't have to do all of the maintenance. They can still bus their kids to school. Right now we've got a huge shortage of bus drivers, so it's very difficult. It's very challenging to be able to put the right amount of people in the right amount of buses to get the right amount of kids to school. So do you think that type of shift will start happening where just fleets of vehicles will start transitioning?
Yes, we're already seeing it. We're already seeing it in the private like coach bus fleet sector. A lot of tech companies are hiring these outside providers to run the whole thing for them, and all they want is a nice shiny clean bus in the morning to move their commuters from, Berkeley down to Palo Alto. We're actually seeing it in the school bus realm already. Firms like Highland Electric and consortiums like Alpha Structure, which is Schneider Electric and Carlyle Group, are coming together with the financing, the solar and battery vendors, the charging technology, the charging vendors, the vehicle vendors, to put together these, we call them fleet as a service offerings that are kind of think microgrid in one. They come on, they deploy all those assets on your property. It's much like a PPA for solar, power purchase agreement for solar, where you don't actually own the solar, but you get all the benefits from it. Or you get some of the benefits from it. It's still less than you'd pay for the alternative, and they're incentivized to continue to keep up those levels of service for you so that they receive their monthly payment. And because they can optimize the solar, the battery storage, the vehicles, the charging technology, and charging scheduling, they can continue to eke more and more revenue out of it as they get better at that. And I think that's what keeps them going, is the potential to, they set a floor for do no worse than, but they know that over time things are going to get better. And so they're incentivized to continue to dial in those operations and do it.
Man, that is very intriguing as my brain is going of, wow, how could we apply that to our educational purposes?
Yeah.
Stephen, talk to us about the biggest gaps that need to be overcome to really tip it over into mass adoption, right? And one that I keep hearing the battery size, how much room that takes up in vehicles or in homes.
Yeah, I mean that is one of the biggest gaps is battery size it's all wrapped into technology, right? You've got battery technology really dictating battery size and weight right now. And I like to think about it this way because it's all interwrapped with something I was thinking about earlier or reading an article this morning. Was talking a lot about concerns over the mining requirements for the minerals made in batteries, right? I mean, the last thing we want to do is create another environmental and social justice nightmare to solve an existing environmental and social justice nightmare. So I think think of batteries where they are today. They're right for some applications. They're definitely not right for other applications. So two things are going to happen. Existing battery technology, existing lithium-ion technology is going to get better. But I don't see that as the be-all, end-all. I see that as a stepping stone along the way to a more sustainable battery technology like saltwater batteries. This is something that's in development right now, right? There's plenty of salt water throughout the world that doesn't require
potato batteries
or potato batteries. That's exactly right. So know that we're on the way to I think a better technology, and certainly there are some things that today's batteries can solve, but there are some things that they will not solve, or vehicles will just be too big or too cumbersome or not have the range for it. But I don't see that as a reason not to take action, right? You look at the technology for what it is today, you look at where you're going and what your ultimate needs are, and take the action that you can given today's technology.
Sure. No, you sold me on the mobile generator as a bus. I mean,
right.
for all the storms that we have in Texas, that would be enough right there to sell me. I mean, that would be very, very useful.
Or I was reading, because of the way the Texas energy market works, folks are really wanting to own capacity in that energy
sell it back.
market. Right? And sell it back.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, kids, we're not picking you up today because we're going to sell your energy from the bus back to the grid at $6,000 a kilowatt hour, and we'll build you a nice new wing for your school based on these payments.
That's right.
It's just the possibilities are limitless, and again, gaps are there. They're real. There's some major constraints with regard to the utilities and how they integrate or welcome this technology. There are upgrades to the grid that are needed, but yet they're not, because the grid isn't a constant load, right? There are dips in demand, and the trick is going to be to align EV charging with those dips in demand so that we can use the existing grid capacity to its maximum, and then charge as many vehicles as we can while the utilities make a lot of the necessary upgrades to allow for even more grid capacity.
Gotcha. Okay, last question. Take us home with this. What's the coolest piece of tech you've seen that's not here yet?
Oh, that's not here yet?
Not here.
Okay. I think it's just starting to take place. There's this concept of a DC fast charger, right? A charger that's charging vehicles at 100, 200 kilowatts, and that requires a lot of infrastructure upgrades. So one of the coolest things that I've started to see, and I don't know why it hasn't taken off more, is something called the FreeWire Boost charger. And that's, I call it the mullet charger because it's a party in the front, business in the, or whichever way it goes. But it connects to your existing infrastructure like a level 2 charger at 19 kilowatts, right? And there's a battery. It trickle charges a battery at 19 kilowatts, and then it can turn around and fast charge vehicles at 150 kilowatts. And that type of thing is going to really become, I think, much more prolific in the solutions that we provide, especially when you look at older facilities with electrical infrastructure constraints. They can put in a 100 amp fuse at 240 volts, but they can't do 100. They don't have 480 3-phase to support the needs of a DC fast charger. So those kind of arrangements, or even using that battery, that interstitial battery, to charge when grid capacity is there, to allow vehicles to charge whenever they want. They come in, they want a quick charge, and they want to leave. They don't care whether it's 2 p.m. in the afternoon or whether it's 6 p.m. They don't care. So really using those stationary batteries to store and shift energy, I see as a really cool and necessary piece of tech to take us into that next iteration of solutions.
That sounds amazing. No, I being a Texas guy, we love our oil and gas here, but obviously there's some great things that are happening. And from a school district, an education standpoint, we're always trying to manage cost and get bang for our buck because it's taxpayers' dollars, right? And at the end of the day, we're trying to provide the best service we can for kids. So thank you for joining and being here today. I hate to take you away from the energy game out there in sunny California, but I really do appreciate your time. And I'm glad that the mechanical engineering didn't work out.
That's right. No, exactly. It's been a circuitous path, but certainly a good one, and one that it continues to evolve and stay interesting. Right? It's not stagnant at all. That's kind of why I love it. So thank you very much for having me. I love this stuff, as you can tell.
Absolutely. Yes, very passionate. All right, we'll have another conversation down the road.
Sounds good. All right, thanks.
All right.
Produced by Podcast Architects.